Brother Archivist Myron awakened to the chime of sext, the hour of quiet recitation. But the vibration of the deck plates beneath his sandals told him the liturgy would not unfold as usual. Scriptorium Station, gliding in its slow heliocentric arc beyond the Jovian moons, rarely trembled. Its gyroscopes were engineered to dampen solar flares, micrometeorite taps, even the restless footsteps of its custodians. Today the metal bones of the station quivered like the strings of a struck harp, and that could only mean one thing. The perimeter guns were firing. He snuffed the incense taper on his workbench, careful to cap the filament so drifting ash would not stain the vellum. Analog, the novices, still insisted on illuminating, and stepped into the corridor. Lamps embedded in the vaulted ceiling shifted from their usual amber glow to a warning crimson. A scratchy burst from the intercom followed. All custodial personnel to defensive posture Delta. Repeat, Delta. Raiders inbound. Myron's stomach tightened. Raiders. Freebooters who trafficked in stolen knowledge. Relic smugglers who would carve memory cores out of helpless archive drones. Mercenaries who laughed at treaties that declared monasteries neutral ground. They had tested other library rings nearer to Mars, but never Scriptorium Station. Not until now. The raiders must have found out about the Carillion caches, the translucent ingots of quantum-locked data, known colloquially as crystals, each containing libraries lost to past collapses. Rumor said a single shard could buy a private moon. Myron knew the rumor understated by half. He was a librarian sworn to preserve, not destroy. Yet the rule of the order allowed protection of knowledge by proportionate means. That clause had always felt academic. Now it vibrated in his chest. Footsteps echoed behind him. Siebling Taylor slipped from the adjacent chamber, her novice's cowl twisted in haste. "Brother," she whispered. "Keeper Abbott requests all red robes to the foundry." Red robes. The archivist trained in technical craft, as opposed to the brown of liturgists or jade of conservators. Myron fingered the crimson braid that edged his own sleeve. "Did he say why?" She pulled him toward the lift. "He means to turn the scribes." "The laser scribes?" Myron asked, incredulous. "The very same. Come, time is breath." They joined half a dozen others in the lift. Brother Cassad, whose cybernetic arm hummed softly, Sister Lyra, her spectacles already displaying schematics, a pair of silent nuns known only as the Twin. The car dropped 2 decks to the industrial cloister, doors opening onto the foundry's cacophony of forges, ventilators, and 3D lattice printers. Abbot Otrick stood on a raised dais, his snow-white beard tucked into his belt, voice amplified by the recessed speakers. "Children of Logos," he intoned. "The Wolves circle. Outer coil shields have failed at sectors 11 and 12. 30 minutes hence, boarding craft will dock. Our auto turrets can stall them, but cannot stop them." He gestured to a row of waist-high pedestals along the wall, tripod mounts fixed with thin, wand-like devices. "These scribes, whose beams once kissed polymer to inscribe verses, shall now carve flesh, if need be. We are librarians, yes, but we are guardians first." Myron swallowed. A librarian's tools transformed into weapons. The thought unnerved him. Yet another thought intruded. Better a beam score pirate armor than have the archives lost, or worse, corrupted into propaganda. Labor raised a hand. "The scribes are limited to 50 milliwatts, Abbot. They can blister, maybe cauterize, not cut." "A correction," said Cassad, lifting his augmented arm. "The emitters share architecture with mining probes. Overclock the frequency modulators, add collimation arrays, and you get a coherent blade." He tapped a command on a forearm panel. A holo unfolded, mapping the modifications. The abbot looked directly at Myron. "You oversaw the scribe's maintenance. Can the crystals spare the power draw?" "The reactors run at 68% nominal," Myron replied. "We rerouted juice from the horticulture rings last month, but I can shut down all non-essential labs, maybe siphon the cooling pumps. The scribes will drink, though we may lose some seedlings." "Seeds can be regrown," the abbot said. "Once history is lost, It is lost forever. His voice softened. Forgive me, little green things. Orders flew. Monks claimed open workstations, prying housings off scribes, swapping lenses, soldering heatsinks. Myron partnered with Taylor. Her slim fingers navigated fiber bundles, while he recalibrated beam oscillators. The air filled with a tang of burnt polymer and ozone. As they labored, Taylor murmured, I once copied a poem about the price of silence. It said, the tongue withheld is the sword unmade. Today, we unmake the sword of ignorance, I suppose. Or we fashion real swords, Myron said, yet he smiled despite the tension. Taylor's faith was fuel. 3 sustaining drones hovered overhead, distributing fresh components. A klaxon bellowed. The abbot announced, Docking clamps are breached, 15 minutes. Myron finished. Tightening a focusing ring, he keyed a test burst. The beam sliced a discarded rail in 2, molten edges glowing cherry red. From a librarian's pen to a razor's edge. Astonishing and dreadful. They mounted the weapons onto servo gimbals, calibrated with tactical overlays from the station's limited defense AIs. Each scribe had an effective range of 20 meters. Mounted near archive vaults, they would create kill zones in the narrow radio corridors. The idea was not to wage a battle of attrition, but to make thievery too costly. The abbot addressed them a final time. Remember our charge. Defend the data crystals. No rage. No cruelty. Fire only when knowledge is threatened. Elevator gates parted for squad assignments. Myron and Taylor were dispatched to Vault Theta, the oldest section, where Cobalt cold safes stored the Curillian cache. They traveled along the concentric passage until they reached the antechamber outside the vault. 2 brown-robed liturgists had arrived earlier, chanting low to steady their hearts. At Myron's nod, they fell silent, listening. The corridor resounded with the faint thump of remote charges. A hatch moaned open somewhere distant, followed by the staccato crack of coilgun rounds. Probably the outer security teams buying time. The station's hum shifted, lights flickering as power rerouted. Myron secured a scribe on its mount, aligning its sensor to the corridor's curve. Taylor synchronized it to her wrist console. Beam hot, she whispered. A muffled explosion rocked the deck. The corridor lights died, emergency strips glowing dull violet. Myron sent a command. The scribe's optics adapted, switching to infrared. Heat signatures appeared like blooming embers. Footfalls approached. Heavy, armored, confident. Raiders. Myron took a breath and triggered the scribe. A pencil of lime light extended across the gloom. The first intruder, a hulking silhouette wielding a flechette rifle, jerked aside, shoulder pauldron melting. He screamed. A second figure rolled forward, deploying a portable shield that refracted the beam, but Taylor pivoted the mount, slicing beneath the shield lip. The intruder's boots severed at the ankle. He collapsed. The brown robes gasped, but began chanting again, a hymn that spoke of iron turning aside from the quill. Their recitation steadied Myron's shaking hands as he targeted a third raider trying to flank using sealing conduits. The beam flashed. Sparks rained. The raider retreated, barking orders. The attackers fell back beyond the scribe's range. Myron exhaled. Taylor touched his elbow. We did not kill? He checked biometrics. 2 maimed, none dead. Thanks, B. Over the comm, Kassad's voice crackled. Multiple boarding vectors. Raiders deploying spider drones in sectors 8 through 14. Theta team, stand ready. Myron replayed the data overlay. The raiders were not mere pirates. They advanced with military coordination. Someone had financed them, probably a knowledge cartel that traded in data black markets. The scribes might slow them, but if they breached the vault door 30 centimeters of composite, they could shatter the crystals and vacuum the shards. He opened a channel to the abbot. Suggest we initiate relocation protocol. Denied, Odric replied. Phase arrays offline. We cannot beam the caches to auxiliary satellites. Hold Theta at all costs. Myron closed the comm and glanced at Taylor. She appeared calm, Yet her eyes shimmered with fear she refused to voice. He toggled the scribe to stand by to cool the barrel. Minutes crawled. Then came a sound like metal tearing, nearer than before. A panel at the side junction bulged, peeled away, revealing raiders wearing exoskeletal rigs. They had bypassed the main corridor entirely. One hurled an EMP grenade. Myron yelled, "Shields!" Too late, the pulse burst. The scribe flickered dead. Taylor's console went dark. The vault's lock field sputtered, recovering but weakened. With no ranged defenses, the library monks had only their staffs, decorative, carved with scripture, but the raiders bore kinetic cutters. Myron's mind raced, weaponized knowledge. The phrase surfaced from training rituals. He snatched a pair of handheld scribes still inside the technician kit, units not yet overclocked but functional after a manual reboot. He and Taylor slammed fresh power cells, bypassing the fried circuitry. The raiders surged through the hole, 3 abreast. Myron thumbed the activator and wrote a bright line across the retinal visor of the lead invader. The visor cracked, blinding him. Taylor's beam carved a fiery X across another's rifle, fusing the mechanism. But they could not stop the third, who shouldered through and kicked Taylor hard. She flew against the vault door, breath whistling. The raider brandished a monofilament blade. Myron darted forward to interpose, raising the scribe like a torch. "Stand aside, monk. We only want the crystals." The raider's voice rasped through a modulator. "To surrender them is to surrender memory," Myron said. "And memory is the lattice of our souls. Philosophy?" the raider spat. "We sell to the highest bidder. Your soul can buy you nothing." Behind Myron, Taylor groaned, scrabbling upright. He calculated options. His beam could not penetrate the raider's composite chest plate quickly, but the station around them was rich in variables. Overhead ran coolant pipes. Myron angled the scrab upward. The beam burned a hole. Supercold vapor hissed out, enshrouding them in a fog that occluded the raider's visor. Myron lunged, gripping the raider's wrist, and guided the monofilament blade up into the same pipe. It severed completely. An icy geyser engulfed the enemy, cryo-freezing armor joints. Taylor swept her beam across the immobilized form, welding suit seams. The raider toppled, encased in glittering frost. "My thanks," Myron said, helping Taylor stand. "Thank the pipe," she coughed. "And your lateral thinking." They dragged the frozen intruder aside, resealed the breach panel with emergency foam, then revived the corridor scribe using manual reinitialization. The brown-robed liturgists offered compresses, quoting verses about steadfast towers. Myron allowed himself a sip of recycled water. It tasted metallic. Over the station network, urgent messages cascaded. Southeast galleries compromised. Index halls under fire. One packet bore grim news. Vault Gamma burned, its crystals irreparable. A pang speared Myron's heart. The Gamma collection had safeguarded the last surviving root code of pre-Exodus terraforming algorithms. Gone. Another call came. "All red robes to the Oculus," Abbot Autric ordered. "New directive, initiate Cascade Black." A hush fell on Vault Theta. Cascade Black was doomsday protocol. If more than 50% of major archives risked capture, remaining crystals would be shattered rather than stolen. Each librarian had sworn the oath, but none ever expected to honor it in earnest. Myron tightened his jaw. We must prevent that threshold. He accessed station schematics. The raiders clustered near the central hub, overwhelming defenders. However, the scribes they had modified were still distributed mostly in peripheral corridors. "We need mobility," he muttered. Taylor gestured to the trackers. Small conveyor pallets used to ferry stacks of brittle century-old parchments. "They ride rails almost everywhere. We could mount the scribes on them. Create roaming sentries." Inventiveness sparked. With hasty tools, they clamped 3 overclocked scribes onto a tracker, feeding power from portable cells used for climate control units. A brown robe reprogrammed navigation routines, feeding heuristic loops. The result? A low, silent platform gliding along rails at shin height, scanning for unauthorized biometrics. firing coherent light at threats. They released the prototype into the corridor. The tracker beeped once, zipped away toward the sounds of firefight. Within minutes, data uplink showed it neutralizing hostiles in Junction K-12. A map update flashed. Defenders stabilized that sector. Hope kindled. Myron rallied more monks to duplicate the design. Soon 6 trackers patrolled outer rings, unpredictable, herding raiders inward, where defensive knots of monks could ambush them. Scriptorium Station, always a haven of tranquil study, now sang with the hum of motile lasers and warrior chants. Suddenly, a priority alert overrode all channels. Bridge compromised. Abbot captured. Myron's breath caught. Abbot Autric, the soul of their order in enemy hands. Without command, morale could collapse. And if the raiders controlled primary systems, they could falsify the damage index to trigger Cascade Black remotely. Taylor looked at Myron. Rescue? He nodded. Rescue. They requisitioned 2 pressure suits from a maintenance alcove, lighter and less cumbersome than combat rigs, and ascended a service shaft toward the bridge spire. Halfway, tremors rattled the ladder. Myron glimpsed slashes in the shaft wall where stray rounds had gouged metal. They avoided the main hatch, opting for a narrow ventilation tunnel that exited behind the bridge dais. Through the grill, they spied the abbot kneeling, wrists bound by magnetic cuffs, yet serene. Facing him stood a woman in sleek midnight armor, helmet off to reveal silver thread hair, and eyes like burnished steel. Give me the master key to the vault network, she commanded. I am only a keeper, Autric said softly. Keys multiply among us. To force one open is to force none. She slapped him. Do not play riddles. Our AI cracked your manifest. We know Theta remains intact. Hand over its locus encryption. Autric bled from the lip, but smiled. Knowledge chooses its guardian, Captain. It has not chosen you. The captain cursed, lifted a pulse pistol, pressing it to the abbot's brow. Myron whispered to Taylor, 2 hostiles at main console, 1 on port balcony, Captain Center. He passed her a microscreen medallion. Its reflective surface could refract a laser. Taylor nodded, understanding. Bounce beams around corners. He counted silently, then kicked the grill. It clanged. Immediately, he fired the handheld scribe. Beam angled off Taylor's medallion. The reflected shaft struck the pistol, melting half the barrel. The captain recoiled. Taylor rolled onto the floor, targeting the console raiders. She burned through their rifles, slagging circuitry. Myron vaulted over the abbot's shoulder, tackling the captain. They tumbled. She was strong. Her elbow smashed against his collarbone. Pain flared. She drew a vibro dagger. Myron twisted aside. The blade thudded into the deck. He knew he could ignite the scribe point blank, but he recalled his vow-proportioned force. Instead, he flicked the scribe to minimum setting and seared the conductive lining of her suit. Circuits popped, locking the exoskeleton in rigid paralysis without fatal burn. The captain fell, swearing. The 2 subordinate raiders tried to retreat, but Taylor, now standing astride the console, leveled her scribe. Drop your gear! They complied. Myron freed the abbot, who rose slowly, touching bruised wrists. He gazed at the disarmed captain. You sought to own stories never meant for profit. Instead, you shall now become a story, a cautionary chapter. He turned to his monks. Status? Taylor scanned the board. Raiders in full retreat. Trackers corralled them to Bay 3, sealed bulkheads. Casualty reports minimal. We lost Gamma Vault, yet Theta Alpha Omega intact. Overall compromise, 42%, below Cascade threshold. The abbot exhaled. Praise the Logos. Let us end this. He opened a channel, broadcasting to the raiders. This is Abbot Autric. Your leadership is detained. Stand down, and you will exit alive but empty-handed. Persist, and we flood the bays with radiation. Choose. Minutes later, sensors registered jettisoned docking clamps, engines firing. The pirate vessels peeled away, retreating toward the black. Relief washed through the station's halls. Bells rang the tone of victory vespers. The red lights faded to amber once more. Yet morning accompanied triumph for the lost gamma crystals and for innocence burned away like slag under a laser's bite. In the infirmary, Myron's collarbone was wrapped with biofoam. Taylor sat nearby, sipping broth. Across the ward, the captain lay shackled, a stasis cuff on her ankle. She stared at the ceiling, perhaps contemplating narratives of her own defeat. Myron said to Taylor, "We defended history by rewriting our tools, but have we written ourselves into a new violence?" Taylor considered. "We wrote a footnote," she answered, "a reminder that guardianship sometimes requires sharp edges. Tomorrow we file away the lasers, reseed the gardens, restore quiet. But if wolves return, the footnote endures." The abbot limped in, leaning on a ceremonial staff scorched in the melee. He smiled at his librarians. "The rule shall be amended. The quill and the blade are brothers, if the story is worth the telling." He raised two small objects, fragments of data crystal from the ruined Gamma vault. "Even in breakage, memory sparkles. We shall salvage what shards we can. Nothing is ever wholly lost while keepers keep faith." Myron extended his hand. The abbot placed a shard upon his palm. Within the translucent sliver, tiny photons flickered, compressions of worlds and words, still alive. He looked at Taylor, then at the busy ward where monks in every color robe tended wounded, repaired damaged equipment, whispered hymns. Outside, the station's sensors tracked the fleeing raiders until they vanished into star-speckled dark. Myron closed his fist around the shard. "Let us return to the Scriptoria," he said. "There is copying to be done." And the lamps of Scriptorium Station, bruised but unbroken, glowed anew in orbit's endless library.